Thank you for coming up and joining us at 9 o'clock, nice and early. I'm Elizabeth Boudreau. I'm an executive advisor in worldwide public sector professional services. I've had the pleasure of working with multiple organizations across public sector for the last year and a half. I work across everything from DoD to higher ed into healthcare and nonprofit organizations. In the last year and a half that I've been at AWS, I've done multiple different things, but prior to that, I've been a customer since 2013. I come from healthcare and Boston Children's Hospital and Claritas Genomics, where I ran a pediatric genomics laboratory all in on the cloud. So I was the first signer of the BAA and the first HIPAA workload in AWS back in 2013. I'm also a former HIPAA privacy and security officer, so I care a lot about security and making sure things are done right. And with that experience, I was able to join the organization and be with you all today.
So my name is Mike Coulson. I'm the Senior Solutions Architect for the DoD team here at AWS. I cover all of Air Force and all combatant commands except for PACOM. That happens to include Transcom, which I'm assuming is why you're here. Otherwise, we will be singing and dancing. So let's avoid that.
We may do that as well.
Oh, probably.
So Mike and I have had the honor the last over a year now working with Transcom on their move to the cloud and their progression as they move forward. But we're going to start talking about why did Transcom even look at the cloud? What was going on in the organization?
Yeah, so it's funny. Everyone thinks this all started like out of the blue. Transcom just decided, hey, we're going to go to the cloud, and then announced all in, and that's how it happened. It started as any migration process starts. There was a problem. So they had system issues. They had issues where, I'm trying to think how far we go into this, but they had issues where DR wasn't quite what they thought DR was going to be, right? The way that we design that within the DoD, I have 20 years of DoD IT experience. We always think that we're ready until something happens. And then we realize, hey, that's the same circuit that we're running on for production. So they found these issues, and they said, well, we can't continue to do this. We're done with the time period of fragility, and we need to be able to expand and to innovate. So General McDough set a very aggressive timetable. He wanted to get off-prem as fast as possible. He wanted to start in a 3-month timetable, which was very aggressive. And that's kind of why I think everyone's like, wow, it happened. But it started with conversations where we were just saying, hey, here's the value. Here's where your pain points are. Here's what the cloud can provide. And it actually, I feel it really started in earnest here last year.
A year ago.
Yeah, at Summit. I mean, we'd had previous conversations, but when we were at Summit, we brought in some of the key folks, and they sat in on our cloud simulation journey, and that kind of popped the eyes open a little bit more, and we then held a couple of these out at Scott.
Base,
I can
yeah.
talk. I'll get there.
On base. So I want to talk a little bit of the cloud simulation journey, because we ran one on Monday and we've run it with organizations. And it's a non-technical workshop to simulate 2 years of the move to the cloud and what has to be done and thought about to make sure this isn't a tech project. This isn't an IT-only project. This involves your entire organization. And a lot of times we forget about that. We think about the blinky lights, we think about changing servers over, but we really need to think about how it affects our organization, people's jobs. What do you move first? How do you deal with things when they don't go perfect, which most of the time is going to happen at some level.
Right.
And so we had 2 representatives come and join us for a multi-organizational simulation workshop, and I think they really understood what it meant, and they saw the power of it. And we brought it back to base. We did one over the summer, and I think it was really transformative. They really had this kumbaya light bulb moment amongst the organization. And when we run these, it's really important to think about who's in the room. This isn't just your top level, everybody who says yes team. This is across the board, and we really had a diverse group One table had a flight surgeon, a lawyer, and
Chaplain.
a chaplain,
Yeah.
as well as 2 IT directors. So we really went across the organization. But they saw the value. We had a great session, and as the program progressed, they had a couple more naysayers come through because things continue to transition, and they asked us back. And a couple months later, we ran it again, and the people who started with, "This is stupid, this is taking 4 hours of my day, what am I getting out of this?" tend to be our strongest proponents at the end of 4 hours of like, "Oh, okay, you didn't talk about services, you didn't talk about the tech, but I really learned a lot, and I really thought about the types of things that we need to do to make this successful. And I wasn't thinking about any of that when we got started." So we really think it's a strong tool. We've been able to do it, but I think it was very transformative when we did it with Transcom.
Yeah, I think the telling part of it is, right? So any migration requires both top-down and bottom-up support. And we're not going to just focus on the Cloud SIM workshop, but what we were able to do with that was we were able to bring in the champions, because it's all, look, IT is sales. When you're inside that organization, your job is to sell the manager on the new technology and why it matters, and their job is to sell exec, and all of your jobs is to make sure that the exec doesn't get overly excited and tell you to run everything to cloud in 2 days and completely transform everything and make everybody pissed off. So the goal being, right, how do we fix that? And so that sales process is we brought in the folks that were doing the bottom-up sale, and then we had an amazing executive sponsor in the 4-star who basically said, look, cloud is our way forward. We understand that there's going to be failures, there's going to be roadblocks, but get through them, find them, and move fast, iterate, and that's the way forward. And because of that direction, right, there were some folks who were like still trying to naysay in the back, but that's where this Cloud SIM journey helped, was because you could get them out in the open and strategically pick out who those people are and invite them, and then have them sit at the table where you have a couple of real champions and make them walk through it, because at the end of the day, it's going to kind of open their eyes to what the champions are saying, but also tell the other side of the story. Because if you're not saying, hey, it's all unicorns and rainbows, there's going to be problems, there's going to be failure, you just have to accept it, then fail fast and experiment and move forward, you're gonna win over the naysayer more likely than not. There's always going to be the ones that are like, change is bad, get off my lawn. But that's, I mean, you can't get around that. You just have to figure out what you do to either work through that person or around that person. And the executive sponsorship helps because, especially in the DoD, they just say, yay, verily, let's press.
So I want to talk about executive sponsorship a little bit.
Yeah.
We were very fortunate to have a great sponsor. And I think throughout public sector organizations, sometimes you hear a CIO or maybe a CEO say, we're going to the cloud. And it's this great declarative sentence with nothing behind it. Mm-hmm. Anybody else had that relationship before? So the difference here was that involvement, and I see that amongst organizations. You need to get the executive sponsor to not just make the declarative, but be involved, be that next level champion to help build through the organization. I've seen organizations where you've got a great lead at the top, and maybe a developer level is really excited about it, but you get what I like to call the frozen middle. If I'm a manager and I just shuffle my feet a little bit longer, maybe they'll forget about this and we'll do something else I want to do. Anybody else been in that organization? So we see that, and that was not the case here. Like, this really came all the way through. We had great leadership, and they were willing to accept some risk along the way. That was very different.
I mean, so anytime you have the commander of a COCOM stand up and say it, that's one thing. But ultimately, it goes down to the 6, right? Like, that's every DoD organization. Here we had an awesome sponsor in the 6 as well, and she was like, look, this is the way we're going to go. We're excited for this opportunity, and she was part of the Cloud SIM journey. She was part of establishing things like the CCOE and moving things in that direction. They all understood that they had to do things differently. The way that they were continuing to support applications it just wasn't going to work anymore. I mean, we could get through some of the technical part of this where they had applications where they just had no code. They didn't know what that code base looked like. How could they transform it? How could they continue to support it? I mean, who here has a VAX running in the back of their data center, right? I'm sure several of you. So that's a problem, right? We have just completely unsupported gear, completely unsupported applications. We have to bring people out of retirement that wrote the application in order to support an upgrade because we found some Sev1 vulnerability, Cat1, Sev1, depending on what your org, and how do we patch that? And sometimes that POAM looks like, well, we got another firewall, we'll just put it in front of it. Yeah, that's not how we do that, right? So they understood, look, we have to press things forward, we have to do things different, we have to remove the blockers for our tech team to actually press, and we need to partner and find ways to innovate and do things in a different and unique way than we've done them in the past.
So some of the accepting the risk along the way, I know a lot of the organizations I work with, anybody have a complete and utterly understandable CMDB? Everybody knows what every server in every space does, because I've yet to find that organization. And the cloud kind of changes that. We put in a lot of transparency and tracking, and once you get past finding the retirement person who can help you move that code, in the new world, it's a different way to think about things. You're tagging, you're tracking, you're understanding exactly what you have out there. But along with that, you're setting yourself up for a much better security proposition, right? So I think they did a great job saying we have a lot of security tracking. Compliance is absolutely paramount in this space. But how can we think about minimal viable product in terms of security? And I think this was a great way organizations think about it is, I know I've got a laundry list, but what can I start with? And I can find the right tool. And then as I do the next level, maybe that tool doesn't work anymore and I can find another tool. And this gradual iteration to get to the right space and build your cloud, guardrails, your boundaries. It's not lockdown, it's not one and done, set it and forget it. You really have to continue to evolve with it. Think about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and is it really the right security? Because a lot of times we have security for security's sake, maybe.
Well, in DoD, and I actually mentioned this yesterday in the other session, so we confuse security with compliance a lot. Compliance is a paperwork exercise, right? It's meeting policy. Security is literally finding, tracking bad guys, finding bad actors, finding vulnerabilities, bug bountying within your systems, being able to resolve those issues or mitigate those issues, because it's all a risk game, right? Am I going to avoid, accept, or mitigate that risk? And so and this was actually a fun conversation that we had with the security team out at Transcom, was they were operating similar to how most of us operate. So in past lives, our legit security team, not the folks doing ATOs and RMFs, had a crash cart that they would run into the data center, and they would plug it up, and they would do the pull down and freeze of any disk space and try to run the analytics and forensics on that drive. And so we had this conversation, well, what's that look like in the cloud? Because I can't take my crash cart into your data center. And it's like, well, yeah, but we have so many cool forensic tools because we can freeze that instance with the session state memory already embedded, and I can attach remotely these forensic tools into that isolated EC2 instance running within its own security group and quickly do all of this, right? And catch them while they're still in session state memory. And that's pretty awesome stuff, and that's forensics that you can't do on-prem easily, not without tipping the scale and letting people know. And plus, I can also, oh, by the way, spin up that new instance so production isn't affected and press forward. And it was those kinds of things where it kind of opened some eyes a little bit to, all right, maybe this is a better way to do things. And from an ops side, right, from the folks that are responsible for running day-to-day operations of this now 17 applications that are up, their visibility is completely different, right? They have a full top-down view of every connection made, every application, every disk that's attached, right? Every block volume that's attached, every interconnect, every port protocol, everything that flows through, which is something that they just didn't have before because they had what we've all dealt with before is those siloed teams. And that's really been broken down because they went to this Cloud Center of Excellence plan where they created a Tiger team. They established members from across the organization, right? So it's not just IT, it's not just the 6, it's all of the subcommands. They all have representation there. Security has representation there. Legal representation, accounting, finance, acquisitions, HR. Everybody is in that room. I mean, the room smells, especially after the 48-hour sprint to RMF. They got a full RMF done in 48 hours. It is getting very DevOpsy in there. They're literally a beer pong table away from being an Amazon office. But it's actually really exciting to see because having come through programs like Navy ERP or the virtualization project for A&G, that was very buttoned up. We tried to do things fast, but we had to follow all of these other plans, and no one wanted to get out of their way. And if you look at things like, if you ever listen to Mark Schwartz, the CEO from DHS, he's actually, we're fortunate to have him now at Amazon, but he used to talk about how there was a mandate for waterfall-only development within DHS, and he had to change that so they could get agile. Some of those same battles were being fought at Transcom. It's like, how do we do this? We have to change this. And that CCOE was able to help break through because they had all that representation. They had everybody in the room at once, and everyone was pushing towards the same goal. And that's powerful. The many hands lift mountains or something. I don't know. But that drive forward is really effective, and that's what pushed those applications so quickly through the first 3 months.
So I want to talk about CCOE a little bit, this
Yeah.
Cloud Center of Excellence. We definitely talk about it as a best practice, and I had a session on it yesterday. But the idea of who do I put in it? How many people do I put in it? Like, is this really, how do I get this philosophy done, right? So one of the things we talk about is when you're first starting your cloud journey, CCOE is absolutely important to get that conversation started. You're building your foundation. You're getting your infrastructure, your security, your applications, that HR, business, project management team all together. And in some organizations, that's 5 to 7 people. In other organizations, it's 30. Yeah. But it also evolves. Again, we don't do anything set it and forget it. It's going to iterate. Because the people who are deciding on your regions, your AZs at your beginning, when you're a year into it or plus, you're worried more about your applications. You're getting migrations. Somebody went to reInvent and saw all the new stuff, so they want to re-architect everything. And you need to have that ability to be agile and think about new service integration. So as we do that, we know we've definitely changed through CCOE, not only because they've grown, but there's turnover in this type of organization.
And it's good, too. I always look at it as starting a cult, which probably isn't the best way to think of it. But the CCOE is, we're just short of Kool-Aid drinking. The goal is to get people in there that are excited, that want to be part of it, and then seed them back out to the other organizations across the entire org, right? So how do I build evangelists that are going to go forth and preach the good word of cloud? Well, I'm going to bring them into a CCOE. We're going to drive towards a common topic, and then I'm going to rotate those folks so that I get the next body in who's excited to work, or the next specialty that I need to drive forward. Put that person back out into their program office, and then they're going to be talking about all the cool stuff that they were able to do, how they were able to run sprints, 2-week sprints, real sprints, not DoD sprints of 8 months, right? How they were able to build epics, how they were able to use those storyboards and Kanban to actually watch the work in progress, move it from the backlog into in process and on to complete. Once they take those things that they learn about Agile, about DevOps, about DevSecOps, and all the other fun buzzwordy things that we talk about in IT today, but that are real in practice, and they actually apply them, and then they take them back to their orgs, you see transformation at that org level. And so we started this process, and then the next thing we knew, we were doing Cloud SIM workshops for AMC. So, this kind of steamrolls things. People get excited. That ball starts rolling and no moss or something. I don't know. I'm really bad at analogies.
It's kind of, and you build internal peer pressure.
Yeah.
They're doing cool stuff. I want to do cool stuff like them. How do we get involved? And I think AMC was kind of a similar situation where that's a great model.
Yeah.
And I like the story that, I'm a former PMP and I know how to run a waterfall project to death. But the idea is, how do you change that model in an organization? You think about building kickoffs. Anybody have to schedule 1 and 2 day long kickoffs in the past? Get down to 90-minute kickoffs and send everybody home. This was a life-changing concept. Having meetings that had mission and purpose and outcomes. Not just let's all talk to each other, but we're going to do something, we're going to make a decision, and we're going to start implementing it. And
daily stand-ups too, right? So they were doing daily stand-ups. Everyone had 2 minutes or less to say what they were working on, and everyone stood up. Like that's why it's called a stand-up. We sometimes think, oh, it's a stand-up, so everyone gets on a conference call and they're all like laid back in their PJs or whatever. This is legit. Like everyone stood up in the room. They went around. They said their spiel in 2 minutes. If anyone went longer than 2 minutes, they were cut off and said, okay, let's have a separate conversation around that, because clearly there's a meeting needed.
Yeah, we want them to be valued.
Yeah, right. And failure was accepted.
Yeah.
So I keep harping on that because I come from that culture where we could never fail at anything, right? We could have bugs were allowed, but we weren't allowed to actually call it a fail. We had to say, oh, we found this, we were able to resolve it, and things, we only took a 75% hit to production environments that were operational within the building that I sat in, and that didn't affect our desktop, but maybe the people who weren't in our building who were using the application, which were 99% of the people were affected, but that's okay. So we have this way of justifying. Well, here, because we're taking this this approach of failure, we say, look, it went down. What was the root cause? Let's zero fault, figure out what happened, and then not let it happen again. Create a lessons learned. Keep that library running, right? Every document is a living document. We want to continue progress forward, continue to iterate, and continue to learn. And that actually, I think more than anything, I want you to take that lesson away, take that lesson back to your organization, because it is going to be transformational if you can accept that you have to fail in order to succeed.
Yeah.
You didn't ride a bike the first time. If you did, congrats, but you didn't ride a bike the first time, right? You fell down. You did that, but you became successful at it. You have to have that fall down in order to learn, hey, I don't want to fall down anymore. And that's how you move. Like you're going to continue to learn. This is not easy. We're talking about not just transforming your IT structure. We're talking about transforming the people who work in that IT structure, the people who work in your organization. You're changing hearts and minds. That's
the soft stuff's difficult. The hardest stuff.
Yeah. Figuring out who those skilled folks are, like doing skill assessments, doing training, actually setting aside time to do those trainings, realizing that sometimes doing the soft skills, learning how to think differently is just as important as how to code differently.
And as we think about changing workforces, we talk a lot about training. I know at Transcom, we looked at bringing everybody to the associate level, brought in trainers, there was e-learning portals. You've probably seen from Amazon announcements and keynotes, we're putting out digital training information left and right, and a lot of it's free. We want to help you bring your organization up. In many of the organizations we work with, you can't just go out and hire somebody. You don't have headcount, you don't have budget, or you don't even know what to hire, right? You don't even know how to write the job description sometimes. And honestly, going out and hiring that rock star can be toxic to bring it into your environment. Don't go find the rock star or the unicorn. They probably work for you already, and they just need some training. They just need a nudge, and all of a sudden you've created a whole new organization that can be self-sustaining, that can be self-breeding of more rock stars and unicorns, which allows you to do new things. Not only are you moving your apps and you're learning the cloud, but as that monitoring and measuring and transparency is occurring, you're freeing up time for those people to do other stuff. And that innovation capability really comes into play. And what have we not done because we didn't have time for? We were fighting fires. We were making sure this stayed up. DBAs may learn a whole new skill set. As we gather more data, we keep talking about, data lakes. A lot of the organizations I have data oceans. It's coming fast and furious. And regardless of the organization or the type of data you're getting, there's a lot of it. So how do we get that in a place that we can use it? Stop putting it in the silos, stop it, well, it's over there, it's somebody else's. By bringing it together, you're enabling that next level. You can do business intelligence, you can do predictive analysis, or our new favorite buzzwords, you can do machine learning and AI.
Right.
And without that data and without that training, you're holding yourself back from the great potential that's out there.
Yeah, so we talk about clearing the fog of war a lot, and that's really what the goal is, right? Is we have all this data, how do we mine it, how do we learn from it? I think the other thing that you mentioned is how do we get to the innovation point, and how do we solve the rockstar unicorn issue? So how many of you are like Lean Six Sigma certified, have gone through yellow belt and black belt? Okay, so a couple of you. I mean, I remember that was a big push, right, within the DoD space. Everyone had their own program. In that, you learned a little bit about some of the theory of constraints. The theory of constraints is that unicorn, right? That unicorn ends up being the central hub by which all things go. And basically you create the monster that is that guy you pull out of retirement in the end, because they end up knowing everything and they don't disseminate information. Well, we can't have that in this org, right? We have to work as a team. So building up internally is good. The other thing that's good is finding the commonality of the operating picture. Finding how do I not have things run amiss and amok out of baseline? Well, it's automation. And that's going to be your answer, right? So anything that I do more than once should be scripted, should be automated. I should use some sort of pipeline for deployment. I should use some sort of automation tool to help ease the either deployment model or testing model or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. You should automate it. I've lived by the motto that I'm automating myself out of a job in every role that I've ever had. Because guess what? If I don't have to do that back way in the day, that password reset for that user later on, if I don't have to do that server build anymore, and if I don't have to install that application every time a new server comes up, if I don't have to change that port on that firewall every time an application ticket request comes in, then I can do something else. And whether that's watching the World Cup online or I'm actually picking up the next cool project, it frees my time up to do more. Maybe not the World Cup thing, but the rest of it. And so the theory is, right, we're freeing these people up. When Elizabeth's talking about the DBA learns new skills, well, the DBA's job was never to learn how to patch a database engine, right? They know that because they have to know that, but that's not what they want to do. Well, if they want to do that, then you know what? Make them a patch compliance person. If they don't want to do that, if they really want to get in on schemas, tables, making that application accelerate, there's way better ways to do that than to have them do the patching. Figure that out, right? Just apply the skills these people already have to the services they know and teach them new skills. And anyone who, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little passionate. Anyone who really cares about this, right? Anyone who enjoys the tech side of it or enjoys any side of it wants to advance, right? The theory that the government employee just likes to get the check and sit there, that's not true, and it's never been true. You have a passion for the mission that you're working on. I have a passion for the mission you're working on. I grew up in the DoD. I've been in it my whole life. So, I want that mission to succeed, and I want you to be successful, so you have to be able to continue to press forward. And the story I tell is, if we think that our combatants, if we think that the folks that we're getting ready to face in this next one aren't looking at those same skills, they're not learning the tech side of this, then we're wrong, and we need to clear the fog of war faster. They're trying to do the same thing. So how do we get there? And the way we get there is new technology, new skills, getting to the point where we're using predictive analytics. And we get to predictive analytics because we're using things like data lakes, and we're using centralized repositories. We're centralizing our data, we're communicating better, the applications flow better. How do applications flow better? They have APIs that can intercommunicate, and we start bringing forth this new technology. That's why I'm part of the DoD team at Amazon and not covering Coke, because I know that this is something that we need, and you all clearly are believers because you're here.
And you're holding a non-Coke product.
Whoops.
So one of the things I want to stress is they got help.
Yeah.
Right? You know, you can only get on the yellow brick road by yourself so far before you got to find some friends and help you along the way. And so not only bringing in third-party training and extra external trainings, but really brought in an integrator to help think about this. And the philosophy behind it, I think, is different than how other people think about bringing in. All right, I'm going to move to the cloud. I need somebody with a ton of cloud experience as my integrator. That may or may not be available to you. But I like the idea that they thought about, no, we need to think about it more as reducing human error. So we're going to look at somebody who's really good at automation and thinking about automation and monitoring, maybe more so on the cloud skill side of it. Because you know, a lot of things we can teach the cloud skills. We've got people, we've got other parts doing that, but we really want to make sure people are going to help us automate this. We want to get that human error out.
Yep.
Not only is your password reset, have you turned your computer off and on again?
Right, right.
Doesn't work quite that way in the cloud, but you know, we want to have speed and scale and move that 60 to 70 apps in a really tight timeline compared to what a lot of organizations are doing. So that integration with the experience for consistency and reliability is definitely important when you start thinking about who's going to help you on this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it all came down to automation, and the environment that's up today is highly automated, highly scripted. It's predictable. The deployment model takes minutes, not hours, to deploy a lot of it. They can have new application baselines up rapidly. Now, some of the look, I'm not going to tell you that all the applications spin up quick, because some of those applications, again, I mentioned, they don't have the code base for it. So some of it's refactoring too. Someone who not only has the skill to automate the infrastructure portion, but has the capability of being able to dig into an app and break it down, to refactor it, to find what the objective of the application is and how it interacts with other pieces. And that part's been interesting, because some of the app owners are really content with maintaining the status quo, and the status quo will continuously be the biggest enemy of innovation. So there's been some gotchas, some hiccups there, but yeah, they're pressing forward, and they've been able to do that because they knew that there was a portion of it that could be done through organic growth, and then there was portions that needed to be brought in.
And we talk a lot about measuring things. So we talk about how fast can you get an application up, how fast can you move an application, how fast have you trained people, and things of that nature. I come from the people side of the business, so I think about, is my staff no longer doing Saturday night deployments? Are they no longer on call after hours away from their friends, family, or whatever they choose to do outside of work hours? Or still, my favorite is, we got rid of the blow-up mattress in the IT office because you ended up overnight doing something, so at least you had a little bit of rest. Or where's the new interview person would come in, you were quick, hide the air mattress so they don't know that that's what we do here. So you want to think about, there's a lot of other things to measure outside of the money, the time and stuff, but how your people react, your satisfaction in your job. Not all of us work in organizations that we have a lot of control over who's coming and going, or some of the hiring in some cases, but you can take an unengaged employee and turn them around. You can make even an engaged employee step up a little bit farther by giving these opportunities, by giving these educational and job description and job changes. So as we think about that, I really encourage people to think about not only your hard number KPIs, because we all have those, but think about what you're doing to your organization. Think about what you're doing to your workforce, and that transformation can be even stronger than the CFO's bottom line.
Yeah. So I want to go back real quick and touch one more time on automation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the other things I failed to mention earlier was that Transcom wasn't just automating in the cloud. So they had parallel efforts that were going on for all of the on-prem pieces. So every application that was deployed on-prem that was being migrated as a hybrid approach was being treated as an automated deployment within the data center as well. So the goal wasn't just we're moving everything to the cloud. It was, hey, while we're doing this, if we find what that pattern looks like, let's implement it on-prem as well. They were looking at migrating the compliance piece as well. So anything that they could do to automate artifact creation, anything they could do to schedule and automate the scan process, the test process, the reporting process that goes through for every application that they stood up so that they could be part of the enclave was scripted out as well. Any subjective work was removed. Anything that they could do from system management, system monitoring, patch maintenance, all of that scripted and removed from fingers on keyboards. Because, right, the issue that we run into with real security, not the compliance side of it, is when one of those boxes gets out of scope or isn't being matched up with a configuration rule set that maintains the baseline, is that becomes a vulnerability for us. Because that's how just about every DoD incident has occurred. Was there was a box that was out of compliance and it got popped. So understanding that, right, was okay. How do I have that automation be part of my compliance regime? And then understanding, that there's tools, not just AWS tools. There's third-party tools, and we can leverage those. Open source tools. We can go out and look at what industry is doing as a whole. If we understand how that process works, if we understand how code repositories work so that we can better manage code check-in, check-out, development, and we get away from the, well, it worked on my machine developer process, right? We can actually be more successful because we can maintain a compliance list on our code base. And that code testing can then be done prior to deployment, and then we can get to a CI/CD model that allows for multiple iterations of applications. So I can constantly change that application, right, and have multiple releases within a single day if I want. So those were sort of the goals that they set forth as part of that compliance, or as part of that automation process.
And thinking about automation and compliance, as Teresa said in our keynote yesterday, we've got GovCloud, we've got Secret, we've got Top Secret. And as you're moving across that continuum of services, that consistency to be able to deploy at those multiple levels with speed and accuracy is really important because you've set and you've done your homework. So you can use that breadth of services in a way that you're not putting the human error in of, well, in this space I do A, in the next space I do B. And I think your point of looking backwards, not all of our organizations are all in cloud.
Right.
And so we have to think about things being hybrid, and that's completely acceptable. So if we are doing it really good in one space, take all that learnings and bring it to the other one. You don't have to have an old guard, new guard.
Right.
The new guard can work across and put you completely in a better place regardless of what your options are or your decisions as an organization may be.
Yeah, when the integrator goes away, right, you have to continue to operate. The integrator's there to augment, to help lift you up and to get you moving, but that doesn't mean that they're going to stay. Why? Train organically, grow organically, learn your environment, and then operate it. So yeah, no, I totally agree, right? And then the commonality of operating picture, I mean, good Lord, I've been talking about having commonality across classifications for forever in my life, I feel like, and we all talk about, oh, it's a single pane, we just have to do the CDS, and then when we get over there, it's Windows 98. So like, if we think about it from that perspective, the service plane is very similar, right? The console is very similar. There's obviously some differences, but not dramatic. API are relatively the same across the different classifications, and that's available. Right now, I can have a real. I talk about lift and shift in a bad way a lot of times, but I can have a lift and shift from a code base and pop up into those higher classification environments and operate. And that's powerful. Obviously, in this room, I'm not going to make too much fun of some stuff that we all are thinking in our heads, but there's stuff that we all know about that actually helps a lot.
And we started off on the why at the beginning of the session, but to put some metrics around it, timeline to recovery went from 4 days to 12 minutes in the cloud.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge change to an organization when you think about what that workload may be and how important in a use case something might be. Then you need to get up and running, and how you do that and what you're doing, it's a game changer for an organization. And even thinking a little bit outside of DoD, we have traditional IT org structures, but we're seeing almost 50% of IT spend happening in other divisions outside of IT.
Yeah.
And so that chief marketing officer of the other organization may have a huge budget that they're not funneling through IT because they don't think IT can do it. And so when we change this model and we change this organizational structure, regardless of your org, you become an enabler of that business, which is a very different position than a lot of us in IT are used to over our careers. We were the team of no, or call us later, or that's going to take 8 months. And now we can do stuff fast, we can do it efficiently, and we can do it cost effective. So maybe we even reduced their budget for something else. So now when they pick up the phone, they're calling us because they know that we can help them and we can enable them. So I always encourage, especially the IT-specific teams, to find your business partner. What is your business outcome you're trying to achieve? Become best friends with that person. I suggest buying cookies. But go be their friend. Learn what their problems are, and then start thinking about the solution.
For us, it's a mission, right? So it's a mission focus. So who's the mission owner? What is the mission? Understand the mission, understand how it impacts the war fighter, right? How does the end user operate with this application? Work backwards. Amazon, it's all about work backwards. Find out what that goal is. When I know and understand that goal, then I can figure out what the best model is for that application. And how many of you have done active with your DR sites?
Or worse, how many of you have
2.
no DR
Awesome.
sites?
Great. Okay.
There's more hands on the second question.
Coop. How many of you are successful in your Coop environments? Couple. Yeah. So there's not all the hands, right? Those are things that we had to think about and resolve. And we're active across AZs for applications. We're looking at DR for some of the applications that are staying on-prem. We're thinking about Coop for how we continuously support applications that are mission critical. Those things have to be, front of mind, and that's all part of that application. When we understand what the mission is, right, the criticality of that mission, we decide that, hey, maybe moving magnets around a whiteboard isn't the best way to track stuff. Maybe we should actually have a dashboard. Maybe we should have an application that does that for them. And maybe that application, unlike the whiteboard that's in one office and we have to pick up and click and talk and tell them where to move the magnets on the other side, maybe that application should be available in multiple locations so people who need it real time can get to it. And I think that's the power of what we're trying to bring.
We just got a couple of minutes. I want to wrap up a little bit and think about, just highlight some of the points we made and give you guys some takeaways and things to bring back to your organizations. We started with learning.
Yep.
We brought people in. They had an event. Some people have a timeline of, I'm closing a data center, I'm losing my lease, things like that. So they're working backwards from a date. In this case, we were working forwards from an adverse event. Get the executive sponsor.
Yeah.
Make sure they're truly involved, not making declarative, I have a flag statements, but actually getting out there and getting involved with the organization. We talked about building a CCOE, a Cloud Center of Excellence. Find those people, and those people have certain traits. Not only are they maybe the security and infrastructure, they're bold, They want to influence. They want to make this a better place.
Right.
So find the personality traits in addition to their skill set, because that combination is really what's going to accelerate you. The other thing is think about maybe decoupling some of your guidelines. Maybe it's not as rigid as it used to be. Start small, iterate, build up your security plans, build your checklists, find your tools.
Accept failure and move forward.
And accept failure.
Accept failure and move forward. Sorry, did I say that twice?
But monitor and measure it. Not only acknowledge it and move forward, but do the why, and how do we not do it again?
Right.
And how are we more efficient going forward? Because that monitor and measure, sometimes you get to the, okay, we failed, move along.
Right.
But if you don't learn from it, it's not going to help as much.
Yeah, having that sprint where it's, okay, I did a sprint and it didn't work. That next sprint being, okay, why didn't it work? And here's my after action. And here's how I think we could do it better. That's important.
And then as you build your CCOE, make sure, don't make this an afterthought, please, but think about your workforce. Do the trainings. Get them educated. Do your outreach to all your organizations that you need to touch. HR needs to be your friend. Legal needs to be your friend. Financials and procurement need to be your friend. Go find them. But when you talk about the organization fully, I always say there's one thing you need to be able to do for every person, and it's answer the question of what does this mean for me? Because everybody asks that, regardless of whatever your role is, and without communication and without outreach and learning about it, that just breeds problems. And let's not fester anything in our organizations. We want to make sure it gets out there. So think about that in your organization. What does this mean for me? I'm a DBA. I'm in the data center. I build servers. What does all of this change mean for me? And then measure. Measure what you're doing. Measure your successes and celebrate them. Sometimes we forget that. We've done something big, we get to a point, and now we have to do the next big thing. But celebrate along the way, acknowledge it, because it's really important. You are changing things. You are changing hearts and minds as well as technology. And we want to make sure you acknowledge that amongst your staff, amongst your org, and get that recognition as you move forward.
Yeah, especially, if you think about the pace at which some of this is going to happen, you want to take that break. You want to not experience burnout across the team. You want to have rotation within that CCOE, and understand that the reason that you're running a sprint and an epic is because you are taking breaks in between. You're not running 2 weeks consecutively every sprint for 2 years, because that's how you'll lose the momentum. You'll lose the people. They just won't be able to operate anymore. So understanding, hey, we're going to have to do something a little different. We're going to have to take some breaks. We're going to have to give them some downtime. Give them some time to train on what's new, or take a sprint that's just a sprint off, right, or whatever. Those things it's critical to be successful long term, and that rotation, again, to seed your cult of cloud out to the rest of the organization. I'm going to stick with it at this point, I think. And actually build up those believers. I mean, that's what's going to build success.
Team of evangelists. Build your team of evangelists.
I like my cult reference.
I want to thank you as Transcom for having us this year and having the honor and pleasure of working with you all and working with Mike. It's really been an honor for myself, and letting us tell your story, because we've learned a lot. We hope you've learned a lot. If you have questions, we'll be around a little bit after the session. But thank you all for joining, and please complete your surveys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.